Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Gaming Adventure and Discovery Explorers,
a show about our adventures and discoveries as we explore the world of gaming.
On today's show,
Galen and I are going to talk about the first session of our Dungeons & Dragons campaign titled Vornheim Halcyon. Then I'm going to look more closely at the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and Galen will take us through a new segment about games as they are found in fiction.
Let's explore. All right, so Chad, we just had the first session of the new Vornheim Halcyon campaign that you're running. And so let me run through, as a player, what happened in it.
Yeah, great.
So all of the player characters came together, and we met on a ship that was bound for Vornheim, this major city in the world that you've created. And we spent some time on the ship, a few days, and we kind of fleshed out some character interactions and how people are relating to other characters and other people on the ship. And then we were each approached in turn by this kind of weird halfling lady who advised us that it would be best to travel to Vornheim in a group, and that she would be happy for a fee to put that group together and lead us there. And we all said, sure. There's no way that you could be an evil person trying to lead us astray. And what ended up happening? She was an evil person and ended up leading us astray. She led us to a out-of-the-way track in Vornheim that was stocked with ne'er-do-wells that were going to murder us or take all our stuff, or possibly both. Mm-hmm. And so the party, in our first combat, extricated ourselves pretty nicely and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Let's go find a real inn, recoup from the battle, and pick it up again next time. And I think that's where we left off.
It was, and there was one thing that I think you forgot about, which was the assassin's assault on the way.
Oh,
so
yes.
You were all traveling in Vornheim.
That's right.
And you were set upon by assassins who were targeting the only human member of your party for reasons which are still unclear.
That's right. I think I just lumped all of the bad things together into one.
Right, but they are indeed separate.
Yes.
Which is a great thing about Vornheim. There's so many crazy bad things that sometimes you can't tell one from the other.
Exactly. Awesome.
I think we intend to have this as a regular segment to follow both the plot and my reflections on the running of the game as we continue through. Mm-hmm. So, and as our listeners and viewers will remember, we had just done a session 0 about a month before. In fact, it was exactly a month. So we're doing first Saturdays is the day we've set aside to game. Mm-hmm. And from that session 0, we had 2 players who'd showed up with really fleshed out hooks and a lot going on with their backstories and characters with a lot of detail. And so I just, as my prep was rolling along, that's where I started. Mm-hmm. And just expanding on those and leaning into those hooks, which, as I think I've said here, and as a reminder, like I've just really decided to invest in that and to lean into the characters' stories driving the plot, not me as a DM creating plot for the characters to come to climb aboard.
Right.
And then as part of the challenge, though, was that we had 2 players who didn't attend that session 0 at all. They were both sick. We had a terrible virus rolling through Seattle at the time. Mm-hmm. That one, in fact, had other issues came up and still hasn't wasn't able to join us for this game either. So I still think she will. She has checked in both times and really expressed interest. Mm-hmm. And looking forward to be able to kind of pull her in as well. And this just brought up really another philosophy of mine as a DM, and something spawned from something that I've really learned from DMing through the years, which is that as a hobby game, Dungeons and Dragons really requires a kind of an additional set of energy and focus from somewhere. And that can be a real barrier to entry. So if you're going to create your own character, you have to learn enough to do it. You have to dedicate at least an hour, even if you know what's going on, even if you know the rules. Mm-hmm. I found, anyway. Would you agree that it takes about an hour to make a character?
Yeah.
I think you make more characters than I do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it depends, of course, on the player, right? If you're more experienced, you can go through in like 15, 20 minutes. But if you're newer, it can take some time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as a DM, one of the things that I do, and actually this is something that I think everybody, I think we would be well served as a hobby and just as human beings, which is to keep our eyes out for ways to increase access to the game. So what are the ways that we can make it easier for players to just come in and play? Because there's a lot of players who want to play.
Yeah.
Who just don't have the language, don't have the reps, don't want to necessarily spend 3 hours before a game, but want to come and they want to give it their all and they want to play. On the one end, there's gatekeeping, which is the bad stuff. That's the like, well, you're not a good enough player because,
right?
You know, do you even Gygax or whatever? You know, there's this whole like, you don't know anything, or do you even know what a drow is? You know, and that's bad. That is bad. That is bad human behavior. And on the other end is how do you make it welcoming and hospitable?
Yeah.
And you know, there's that spectrum, and even I think that axis can go too far as well, because that can become patronizing, and that's the trick, right? You can be pressuring people to play who don't really want to play is one hazard of being too welcoming.
Yeah.
And the other is someone can I mean, you know, it leads accidentally into behavior where the more experienced players are trying to play the character for the newer player.
Right.
And they're even in the best intentions. And that's not good.
Yeah.
So I think that middle path is always the most challenging.
Agreed.
So anyway, just as I was thinking about like, okay, I want to make sure that this player who's relatively new but has played, was a part of my other campaign, you know, is you know, invited and welcome to come aboard, and still being mindful that you know, she's got to, you know, I'm not going to make her character for her unless she wants me to, unless, you know, and because that can be part of the fun. So anyway, so that was just one thing that was happening, spun off from session 0, and then as I was preparing for the session itself, I really got to, you know, I don't think this really came into focus until after the session, but I realized that a session 1 is the first session of a campaign is very much like the pilot episode of a television show.
Right.
So you have to introduce all the characters. So thinking about, you know, a few pilot episodes, you know, from some of the favorite shows. So, you know, Battlestar Galactica from the 2000s had that, you know, the miniseries. You know, I was thinking about very not gamery, but a good show. It's The Marvelous Miss Maisel. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Definitely. And so that pilot episode, it's just an hour long, but the first half of it, you know, she's in this like ideal state. It's like this ideal world of 1965 or something. I don't know what year it takes place.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is this? I almost like turned it off because I'm like, I do not want to watch a show about this upper class woman like living her best life.
Yeah, exactly.
But it all falls apart.
Yep.
Which is the beauty of it. But the first half of that show is not at all like the rest of the show, because it's kind of building her up to have her big fall, which is then the cool stuff of the show. Anyway, so the first episode of the campaign, you're trying to get everyone together. All the players and the player characters, both, this is separate problems, need to meet each other and to come together as a group.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is a new group. You know, you and Scott and I had gamed together, but, you know, and Scott is often on here as Kaikoni, and, you know, Moira and Mike and Rebecca had not, and I gamed with, I think, all of them in some degree, but never together. And then, of course, all of your characters were brand new. So that was a lot to kind of get through, and it's awkward, you know, frankly, as a DM. I think, as everybody, it's a little awkward. And it's also, just like a pilot episode, your first session of a campaign is the first opportunity to get feedback and to figure out what works and what doesn't, and what people are really interested in. And so I think we'll often see in a pilot episode, you know, characters who are introduced and then recast for the first episode of the actual show,
right?
Or and I think in the game it's similar. It's like, okay, what are the players going to respond to? Is there something that I was going to do that just didn't work, or you know, that just seemed dumb once things got going, or whatever? Anyway, so I'm just kind of narrating out the challenges of that first session. And so my strategy as I was going through was that I wanted to kind of stick to some principles, which was that it's a largely human campaign, even though almost all my player characters are not human. But,
That's right.
But the session is, the Vornheim is mostly human with some elves and some other races as well. Blossom, who you'd mentioned, the ne'er-do-well, was a halfling.
Yeah.
Is a halfling. She was not killed. She got away. And as I was preparing, that gave me an advantage because in the monster manual, all the non-player characters, all the humans, are in the back of the book. So I knew where to look as I was preparing. I'm like, okay, here's a spy, here's a guard, here's a commoner. Here's just some stats that I can play with as a starting point.
Yeah.
So I had that sense. I knew I wanted to introduce some mysteries. I wanted to maybe not introduce all of them, but I wanted to get some things rolling to get you guys wondering. That sense of wonder, I think, is something we all named, and I think that's something that we're going to be playing with a lot, and I wanted to get that started. And I think another important thing that I think most DMs and players understand is that first session, you kind of want to take your character out for a spin. You want to use it a little bit. You want to use your powers a little bit. You want to roll some dice and kill some shit, pardon my language, and get used to that. Yeah. And so, you want to put a little combat in there just to juice it up. And finally, I wanted there to be enough of that to get you to second level. Because first level D&D is so lethal. You kind of just want to whiff it. You smell it. You want to just cruise on by and get on to second level so you can have a little bit more buffer. Have some more of the cool stuff in your character that you want to do.
Yeah, I remember before the session started, I sat there and I was saying, I looked down at my character sheet and was like, wow, 8 hit points, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think everybody, maybe not the fighter, had single-digit hit points.
Yeah.
It's just, which is cool. And, you don't really get all your class features till third level also. Right. So you're not really playing with the full character. So anyway, so those were my principles going in. And I plotted out, so, I was sitting, thinking about what... how I was going to handle it. I plotted out a few different things for you guys to encounter. I didn't know, for example, for sure that you were going to sign off with Blossom. If you hadn't, that could have been fine. You could have just trucked into the city. I was hoping you would at least stick together. Yeah. And I think that's the thing as a DM. You always have to be prepared for either outcome. I've been surprised by both. I have assumed the players would not take the hook. Yeah. And then I've also assumed that the players would take the hook. And I've been wrong both ways.
Sure. Yeah.
So, it just is what it is. During a lot of this prep, for me, it was a mile wide and an inch deep. I was thinking a lot about Vornheim. Yeah. I was thinking a lot about, that part of Halcyon. I was thinking about the characters and how they were going to interact. So I had a lot of ideas and a lot of things that will come out. And I'm not going to tell you the things that are probably going to come out later. But there are some things that I thought about introducing in that first session that I put off. Yeah. And there was one scene that I essentially cut out that I think is just never going to appear again, which was I thought about having a scene on the ship to give you guys a chance to interact on the ship and make some important decisions there. I was going to have a stowaway be found and have to walk the plank, essentially.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, and that would have given you a chance to maybe alienate the captain. And I was going to do it in the harbor or something, so if you just jumped off the ship, you could swim. That would have been fun, but, ultimately, I just thought it was dragging out getting to Vornheim. Right. And it's the name of the campaign is Vornheim Halcyon. And I didn't want to just sneak Vornheim in at the end of the session or have to push it. So I just decided to kind of push you guys along to the thing. So that was a lot of my thinking about the prep. And we had one player who got the times mixed up and came an hour late. And it happened to be one who had missed the first session. So he just kind of swept in. He did have his character ready to go. He was doing his best. No harm, no foul. But that kind of set things off, off kilter a little bit. So we just had to kind of roll him on board. Yeah. And my strategy for that was, he came in, we said hi, but we kept playing until we got to a bit of a stopping point, which wasn't very long. And then we took an actual break so that we could kind of integrate him as a human being, the human player, into the group a little bit and say some welcomes. And, I needed to use the restroom and just took an actual break and then got everybody rolling again. And I thought that worked pretty well. yeah, there were still some things about the city that I'm still getting used to. You know, I'm not used to running a sandbox environment in an urban setting.
Yeah.
And I have that city kit. I don't have it here, but that we've talked about, that Vornheim kit by Zach Smith. And it's useful, but yeah, it's different. There's a lot of tables and how to use the tables and rules of thumb, and
Yeah, right.
and it's a different flavor than I'm used to, and so that's back to that mile wide. It was like trying to get a sense for the city and how I did map out how the neighborhoods work together, but I need to do some more work there.
Yeah. And I think too, when you're talking about a mile wide and an inch deep, I think that's a great way to approach, especially beginning sessions, is because the players aren't going to get real deep right away. And so if you can paint with broad strokes, you give the players and their characters a sense of the world, right? It just helps to kind of flesh the general broad strokes out. So I think it's a great way to start.
Yeah, I do too. It's a tough thing as a DM for the prep, because you want to be sufficiently prepared. You want to have enough of both. You want to have an actual plan for and I tweeted this of like, I felt very unprepared because I was finalizing the details of those encounters that morning.
Right.
Even though it'd been like 3 months that I'd been preparing.
Yeah.
And and as a DM, you're advised wisely to start small, but that's tricky, and so there's different ways to start small and different ways to stay focused. And so it felt, it was a little imperfect, but I think it'll, again, as a pilot episode, I think it was fine because it introduced things, it got things started.
Yep.
And I have great ideas for the next,
the
next episode 1,
Awesome.
not to confuse things, but anyway, like for the next session. So, I've got a list going where, I think it makes sense because your group just came to the city. And so, I think you and I have both probably experienced this as human beings, where when you come to a new city that you don't know, it's really overwhelming. I did not understand how the neighborhoods worked for years in Seattle, when I moved here in the 90s. Like, you have no concept, really. Like, it's just like, it's all just like enormous. And so I think actually that kind of, it makes sense then that the player characters don't have a good sense of the neighborhoods after just walking in and getting in a fight and having to run at night and that stuff. So but more to come. I'll be working on that for sure. And the sense of the weather, I think that's something they'll be talking. I want to really integrate the feel. Vornheim is a northern city that I think is much like Seattle is right now, which we have this really crazy snow pattern in Seattle, which is very unusual. Like every 10 years we get this array of weather where it's like 3 cold fronts in a row that dump snow on us, and it's very strange. So only in Vornheim, that's like all the time. There's more people for you guys to meet, including Ilmater, your god's representatives. Whether it's angels who'll be whispering in your ear, or priests or other religious people that will have some things to say and ask of you.
Yeah, of course.
This session also, the first session that we were talking about, really relied heavily on one of the players' backgrounds, and I think that was fine. I think it was the right way to go. He had some really good ideas that lent themselves to that. But I want to spread the wealth also. Like, I've got some really good ideas for some of the other characters to be hooking into. So that'll be coming soon.
Yeah, and it's a great way too, like those hooks with other PCs, because the rest of the party didn't know what was going on, right? Like, why is this? What's happening with this other character? It creates intrigue, right? And the other players are curious, so it makes you want to learn more about the other characters in your party. So it's really cool. Yeah, exactly. The mystery and what are these assassins doing? Like, why are they? Who are these guys, and what do they want? Which he doesn't know either. Yeah. Neither the player nor the character know what that was about. Awesome.
So. And then, mechanically, there were some things I realized that I want to do better. It's funny. Mechanically, I really felt a little off. Like, I really, for one thing, I had gone through and reviewed like some of the optional rules that I wanted to do. Like we're doing slow healing because I want to have more downtime, and I want to use some of the actions that are optional in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
because I realized you had asked me about that in our previous campaign a couple different times. You had specific things you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I liked that. And I also wanted to make that proactively available to the other players who don't have the DM's guide, the Dungeon Master's Guide. So anyway, but I had done that, but then I did not go back and review how those worked.
Right.
And so
right.
And it'd been a long time. I don't know. I just felt I hadn't really had my mind in the mechanics of 5th edition, which is weird because I've played it a lot over the last 4 years, but just over the last, I just hadn't kind of brushed up on some of those things. So
Yeah.
I want to kind of, bolster that a little bit and make sure everyone understands where I'm coming from. And the initiative system, I think we'll keep playing with.
Right.
It went well enough that I think I'm validated in not doing the normal, way of doing it, where everyone rolls and I roll for the monsters.
Yeah,
and
right.
Everybody gets a place, and I do cards. I did initiative cards for years and years. 10 years I've been doing initiative cards, since 4th edition.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's too much processing. So
I agree.
I think I still want to do that. But I also have some ideas about, I might have you guys sometimes still roll, but instead of everybody, but only roll for a starting point.
Gotcha.
So then it's just like, well, who's highest? That's just a few seconds. And then do clockwise or counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Rather than, then writing it in my book and setting up the cards and all that stuff. So.
I thought the way it worked, it just sped things up so much.
Yeah.
Like, because that's one of the things you mentioned is that you get right up to this precipice of something that's going to kick off, and then you have to back out and do mechanics and then build back up that interest again. But I thought the way we did it was great. We just flowed right into it. It was perfect.
Yeah, I know. And the first time I heard about this, I think it was Robert Schwab's Shadows of the Demon Lord. I think he uses a different initiative system in that game, and he was on a podcast. He's probably said this several times because he hates the D&D initiative.
He does.
And first I was like, but roll for initiative is the coolest sentence in gaming.
It's pretty great.
Like, why would...
Yeah.
But I think we're just kind of conditioned to that. Like, I think it's a Pavlovian response rather than it being really... Really the good... It's not really the treat. It's the word for the treat. So can't we just get the treat?
Yeah.
Why do we have to... so... And the other, related to that, to speeding things up, I also want to, just on my part as a DM, just have the miniatures more ready, because I realized that, we had done this initiative tinkering, but then I'm fidgeting around, looking for proper assassin minis or whatever. And I think that's a relatively easy thing that I can do. And I still want to keep playing with how we use miniatures. I realized whenever I put them on a battle mat, a gridded battle mat, very understandably, players count squares.
Yeah.
Like, that's very logical.
Yeah.
Even if in my head, I'm like, you don't need to count squares. We're only using this for an approximation. The reality of the world that y'all find yourselves in, you as players, it conflicts with that. So I think I might just use the table or sometimes, or I'm going to be playing with that as well, just to, keep the game smoother.
Yeah.
Those are all my thoughts, and that's what's next.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and I'm intrigued with where this is going to go.
Yeah, good. Mission accomplished. That then, I touched on it before, but that reminds me of comes to our next topic, which is the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
What I had found as I was spending some time with it, looking at those actions to begin with, was that there's actually a lot of good stuff in that book, and I think yours might be the same way. No, you use all digital, so all your books are pretty. Is that right, Galen?
Yes, that's
I think
true.
your books are all in and mine are falling apart, and I'm written all over them, and I'm on my second monster manual and my second player's handbook.
Right.
But what I'm not on my second one of is my Dungeon Master's Guide. And now it is possible that the Dungeon Master's Guide was printed with better binding. But I bought it at the same time. I think these were all first edition things, right? Not first edition, but the first printing. And I doubt that the Dungeon Master's Guide was printed any differently than the Player's Handbook or the Monster Manual.
Yeah.
But nobody in 5th edition's Dungeon Master's Guides have fallen apart like the Monster Manual and Player's Handbooks have. And I think that's just, none of us are looking at it.
I think it's true. Yeah.
And actually, I'm really curious about your experience, Galen. Did you read your Dungeon Master's Guide when you first bought it, when you were preparing for your Strahd campaign?
No. I looked at the short answer. No, longer answer is I looked at specific sections that were going to be relevant to what I was going to be doing. So I'm looking like magic items, treasure tables,
totally
travel times, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I've always used the encounter building guidelines. I know they're not perfect, but they're at least a starting point. So that's another section that I've used quite a lot. Yeah, but if you look at the thing, it's actually like there's a lot of part of what's awkward about it is that there's stuff that you don't need at all.
Yeah.
In there. Yeah. There's stuff that as a DM it's cool. I'm not saying it's bad, but like, and it's right up front. There's this like stuff about the planes.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff about the planes, the astral plane and all that stuff, which is fine. It's cool. It's even good. Like I don't want to. It's not bad, but it's not essential.
No.
And
right.
It doesn't really help you be a better dungeon master. Those parts of it.
Yeah.
Now there are sections that do. There is some good advice in there. And actually part of my struggle is that it's been so long since I've been a new dungeon master. It's hard for me to really look at it and think, would this help me if I didn't know how to DM? And I think maybe a little bit, not supremely. Though I have to admit, thinking about this topic, I pulled out my advanced D&D, my first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and that thing's a mess. That's even more of a mess. like page 30, like it's talking about hiring henchmen and hirelings, and it's like that's not a core part. Like it's in there for sure. Like that's the thing, especially in first edition, you would do more of, but it's like wow, and then page 30, like you don't even know how to like run your monsters yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Hiring staff. Like okay, and I think it's just
maybe put that later in the book.
Yeah, and it's just funny. I think there's some history there of like all of the DM's guides are a little awkward.
Yeah,
but as I was looking at the 5th edition, like I get how it was organized. Like there's 3 big buckets. There's because it thought of like, the DM is the master of the world. Because it is master of the world. And then you're master of the adventures, and then you're master of the rules. Those are the language that it uses. Again, that's as good as any way to organize.
Well, I'm curious now, because we mentioned that you're using the hard copy, and I'm using the digital. So
okay.
I've never gone through the hard copy version, so I don't know. Because when I pull up my digital, I use the D&D Beyond digital version, and when I pull that up, it gives me 10 sections. And I'll just go through them real quick.
Okay, great.
A world of your own.
Yeah, okay.
Creating a multiverse. Creating adventures. Creating NPCs. Adventure environments. Between adventures. Treasure. Running the game. Dungeon Master's Workshop. And then the appendices.
Yep. Those are the same. Those are the chapter
heads. Okay,
heads.
So those are just they're one-to-one as far as the chapters. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, the first 2 chapters are part 1, which is I think Master of the World, and then chapters 3 through 7 are Master of the Adventures. So it's all about creating adventures, and then running the game is like Master of Rules.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Okay, on my little thing, there's a tiny bit of text that has the chapter number as well. Okay. Great.
Yeah, and one thing that does not appear in here, and in this 21st century, maybe it's fine, but there's not an example play in this book. And so, yes, you can Google it now with YouTube. You can watch Critical Role and you get it, right? And that's fine. But in a self-contained way, and there's also not a commentary. It might be nice, if you're just trying to get your head around like what it is to be a Dungeon Master. Like it doesn't. It's not a great like introduction on how to be a DM, frankly. But there is really cool stuff in there. And so what I realized is that, especially at the back, and I think that's part of my quibble, is that the stuff at the back is about the rules. And the rules are actually like the tricky part about running the game, and especially those optional rules that I had talked about. They're they're kind of hidden in the back a little bit. And there's some kind of rules about sizing. It's a lot of kind of important stuff.
Yeah.
The takeaway is like, don't forget to read your DM's guide.
Yeah.
DMs.
Yeah.
I think I went years probably, or at least many months without barely cracking it, or only looking at, like you'd mentioned, the magic items, for treasure, or, the treasure tables or encounter building,
right.
And not looking at any of the other stuff. especially the rules at the back. I think there's some really cool things, and something I hear online a lot, and I've probably even done it, is there's complaints about, like, say, initiative. We've talked a lot this episode about initiative. Mm-hmm. There are like 3 or 4 different ways to manage initiative in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's it's in there. That stuff has been play tested. Maybe not to the degree that the official, the basic, fundamental rules are, but still, it's it's not just some random stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, there's the alternate healing rules that I'm using also in there, slow healing and actually fast healing. There's a few different ways of managing healing. Yeah, part of it too is there's all these random tables in there, which are useful to a point. Just I had spent some time and wanted to share my thoughts about that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's a fascinating topic too. I mean, when you mentioned the fact that there's no like block of text in the DM's guide that has that run through, is like Jennifer, who's playing the dwarf fighter, decides that she wants to kill the orc, and is like, and that kind of stuff. And I thought about it for a second, and I was like, I remember reading that in every other sort of RPG guide or RPG that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Including, D&D. I don't know about second edition, but first edition, even though I was kind of, complaining about how it's organized, it has a big section in there.
Yeah, totally. As a new player, when I was first getting into it, I was like, well, I don't know what D&D is, and reading those things, it's really helpful for someone who has no background in it at all to sort of say, oh, you mean it's all about discussions between people? Really?
Yeah.
At a table?
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Though I do remember I won't flip through it here, but in the original, Dungeon Master's Guide for AD&D, in that section, one of the characters, there's some spiders that the party's fighting, and she tries to stomp it with her boot, and that has just bothered me ever since. Because it's this outfitted player character group. They've got swords and spells and all this stuff, and she tries to fight the monster by stomping it out with her boot, and I never liked that. Who does that? Who does that? Anyway, I'm kind of now. Maybe I'll look at another time. I'll look through that and think, am I remembering it right, or what am I missing, or what was it? Maybe they were trying to just convey that you can just describe what your character would do just like a normal person. What would you actually do? If you saw a spider, even if it was big, if it wasn't giant, just a big spider, you would stomp it with your boot. So, so maybe that's the point of that.
So I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. Something just floated into my head.
Yeah.
I was thinking about all of the games that I can remember being played in popular fiction, be it sci-fi movies or TV series or fantasy, or books.
Yeah.
And so it's something I think I'm going to try and turn into a regular topic here, because I'm kind of fascinated at how those games fit into the world. Because gaming is a really fascinating sort of cultural thing, and it brings people together and sort of gives you a sense for what these people are going through and who they are, and just across whole species or whatnot. Anyway, and so I was just kind of fascinated in that aspect, and then also thinking about whether these games, since they're in these popular things that usually make a lot of money off us in a lot of different ways, have they turned them into games that we can actually play in real life?
Right. Yeah.
And so the first one that I want to talk about is, I think, probably the first one that I can remember in my consuming of pop culture stuff, and that is the game of 3D chess played between Chewbacca and R2D2 aboard the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
Yeah. And so I thought that's what I did my search term was. What was the game that Chewbacca and R2 played? And I found out it does have a name. It's called Dejarik. Of course, right? Because it's Star Trek. It's got a weird... Star Wars. It's got a weird name.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's... I doubt that... Do you know... Was that purely named... That wasn't named in a movie yet, has it? Have you heard it? Do you remember? Did your source... Was it pure, in the novels or something? Okay.
God, I don't remember. I got all my info off Wikipedia. and
Okay.
that. So here's the basic rules of Dejarik.
Yeah, great. How do you play this thing?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a 2-player game in which teams of holographic creatures battle each other on a circular board. And the creatures were taken in this world from real and mythological creatures from across the galaxy. So already I'm thinking, oh, interesting. They're saying here's mythology and here are real creatures. And I was like, that's kind of what we do as human beings, right? When we make a game.
Totally.
It's like,
Totally.
Here's a bear versus this cyclops or that, weird kind of thing like that. And so, and all those creatures there are 8 of them in this game. And like a base version, because I guess there are other versions as well. But these creatures are this is the fun part, right? Star Wars names.
Oh, jeez.
The Gik, the Hujix, the Chlor Slug, the Kintan Strider, the Mantelian Savrip, the Molitor, the Monarch, and the Ungok. So, okay, right? It's really, really kind of fun. 2-player game, and it's this circular chessboard with rings.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And each of these...
I'm just thinking real quick, just so everyone's remembering.
Yeah.
So we've seen this played, first in A New Hope, episode 4, on the Millennium Falcon. Yeah, Chewbacca and R2D2 are playing it.
Yeah.
And I think R2, what we see is like a shot where R2 does something, and his little monster grabs Chewbacca's little monster. They're like holograms, and like kills it.
Yep.
And it's very fast.
Yep.
And then Chewbacca complains about
Yeah.
it. And I think, I just saw Solo just came on Netflix, so I just finally saw Solo, and I think it appears there.
It does indeed. Yeah.
As well. And I don't remember the details of that. I think it's a very similar shot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah. So all of these, like I said, there are 8 monsters that you can play with. Each player is randomly assigned 4 of them at the start of the game. And 2 of the monsters in that 8 set are like the really powerful ones. And then they're in descending power order. And they are assigned a stat. They each have an attack stat, a movement speed, and a defense stat. And depending on how you move them and who they're next to and their positions on the board, they get buffs and bonuses to these different stats. And so you can move them and attack with them. And that's why, like, R2 was in the right position with his monster, so it one-shotted one of Chewbacca's monsters, and Chewbacca was pissed.
Yep.
So that was that.
Do you remember Archon, the computer game from the 80s? I played it on the Commodore 64. There was a version, Archon 1 and Archon 2.
Yeah.
So it's similar a little bit. So it's so this was an actual computer game that set up on a chessboard essentially, and you got knights up front, knights on one side and goblins on the other.
Right.
And it's a little more like chess than this Dejarik is, but but each one has its own unique way to attack, and so it was not perfectly symmetrical from side to side. So I remember there was and maybe it was Archon 2, and it's been a long time, but like there's a phoenix. So the phoenix, you would push the button and it would just like burst into flames, and if you were close, it would burn up. So you'd play like chess, and then you'd go into a battle screen.
Yep.
And so the battle screen is where you would have the shooty or the phoenix would burst into flames or whatever, and you would have an advantage based on if the square you were on was light or dark. And so if you were the light, if you were controlling the light pieces, you would be tougher if you fought on the white squares. And some of the squares changed color throughout the game. And so you would have an advantage, based on that. And it took me forever to figure that out. I didn't know why. When the computer did it, like his goblins always just bonked me dead. And when my knights fought, they always died. It took
the computer's cheating.
It was like, it felt like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that's exactly what Chewbacca felt.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it's a really interesting little game with tactics and everything, and the fact that you're assigned a random set of 4 of these characters, so you may have both of the really powerful ones, or it could be all different configurations of it. And it's the last person standing. The last person with a piece on the board is the winner.
Okay.
And there are another part of the this series I want to do is thinking about is this something that we can play right now? And the answer to that is yes, you can. And actually, in 2015, I think, WizKids put out miniatures of each of those monsters that were used in that chess set.
Nice.
And so you can get those, and then there are various rules. Some are described as being the definitive Dejarik rules that you can download, and game boards you can download. And if you
I was
search,
gonna say, I bet there's like holographs. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a
the technology exists.
Stuff. Exactly. I'm just waiting for it now for the PlayStation View or something like that with the visors and everything. You can just go ahead and play Dejarik with your friends. So
nice.
This one ticks all the boxes. It's in the world of Star Wars. It's ingrained in it, right? It's got their mythological creatures, so it's something that's deep in the world, connected to it that way. And we can play it if we want. Mm-hmm. You can go and play those weird Kintan Strider monsters and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
and I'm thinking about the role that played in the narrative too, because I think that's an important part of like the games that I'm thinking of that were most interesting advanced the story somehow, or advanced something about the story somehow.
Yeah.
And in at least A New Hope, we were learning about it was more character development. I think,
totally.
Right? It didn't advance the plot, but we saw that Chewbacca could play games. Like we didn't know him very well. Mm-hmm. But we also saw that he wasn't as good as the droid.
Yeah.
And, gave, 3PO as the kibitzer a chance to, open his mouth and be rude about him. And
there's that great interaction between Han Solo says it's not wise to upset a Wookiee. And then C-3PO says, no one ever worries about upsetting a droid. And Solo says, that's because a droid doesn't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Yeah. And it's like, there you go. We just now have a vision of what Chewbacca does when he gets a little miffed at losing a board game.
Totally. Though I think as we learn about Chewbacca throughout the next movies, I doubt Chewbacca has actually ever pulled a droid's arms out of its sockets because he lost at a game. Yep. But they weren't friends yet, right?
Yep.
So I think they were just screwing with the yokels. So
it reveals a whole lot of character in that one scene about playing a game. It's great.
Yeah,
it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, and it was also a slower moment, right? Because they were on the Millennium Falcon after the shootout at Mos Eisley.
Yeah,
Luke was learning he was taking his first how to be a Jedi lesson. Yeah, I think around that same time.
Yep.
And Han finally could take a break, after they'd shot their way out. And
so,
from a kind of a tone perspective, it gave you the audience a chance to take a breather, let the characters interact around the game. Yeah. Right. Just reminds me that's how our lives are. Right. I don't know. I think you feel it, dude. Like some of those, life gets so hectic and so crazy, and just to be able to come around the game table on on a weeknight, even when you're exhausted,
exactly,
it still fills your tank a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, and it made me think too about like in 5th edition or in any of them, the downtime that characters get. Right.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that they do. They'd relax. They'd play a game.
Yeah.
They'd try and forget about the attempted murder, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah. And to kind of brace themselves for the next thing to come.
Exactly.
Because in that movie, shortly after they learned that Alderaan was destroyed, right? Which was awful, right? So.
Spoiler.
Yeah, right. Spoiler.
Yeah. So that wraps up the first incarnation of gaming in popular culture.
Yeah. And so maybe Do you know which other games you might be on your short list to do?
Oh yes,
To do next under consideration. You want to share any of those? Just to not to start.
I want to
start conversation, but
running through the canon of games in Star Trek.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, so maybe we'll put that on the schedule for 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm. So I think that wraps us up, Chad. I think we've tackled all the things that that were on the docket for today.
So everybody, if you are watching this on my YouTube channel, please click the like button if you like it, and consider subscribing to the channel. If you're listening to this on our podcast, please, it's very helpful if you can give us a review on iTunes. That helps people find us. We're a new podcast. We're trying to find our audience and draw people to us, and tell your friends and not complain. Don't complain on social media about us. Brag about us on social media. Though if you have complaints, we want to hear those too. And then, Galen, what should they do if they're watching us on your Twitch?
Yeah, if you're watching this on the Twitch channel, you go ahead and hit the follow button up top there. You get notifications when I go live. You can also follow me on Twitter at Zobmie, Zobmie. That's a great place if you're catching the podcast and you want to suggest something that you'd like to hear us talk about, or give us your 2 cents about something that we've already mentioned.
I'm there as well at Clockwise, CONTCLOCKWISE, short for Continuing Clockwise. And with that, I think we are done for the night.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for listening, and take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you next time. Sweet.